Hello, welcome to my next Raw and Real podcast entitled My Personal Exploration Towards Authenticity, Truth, and Empowerment. Now, I chose this topic for the next Raw and Real episode with some hesitation, and I want to share that hesitation. It's something that I've been sitting with a long time before even starting this series, which is, well, am I not going to be too direct? Am I not going to be just negative in my messaging? And I have so many bad experiences. What good do I have to share? And I get into that mode where I just begin not sharing. And I've done that for a long time, waiting for a better opportunity, waiting for a better moment. And it kind of feeds into exactly what I want to be talking about with you guys today, which is my personal experiences with um, uh, growing into becoming more authentic, more truthful, more real, more empowered. And I find that a tough one, a really tough one. I've had to kind of do it anyway type of thing, which is what I'm doing now. Come to this point of no more waiting, just doing it. And many of you will recognize that point in your own lives as well. But I have some interesting things to share on about my journey that I've experienced on the way here. I'm trying to structure this so that you get good content from my experiences during this, podcast episode. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is that, I don't know how many of you are actually deeply committed to the spiritual path. And I realize spirituality as a concept is very diffuse in its it's very broad in what it means to people. One thing that I've learned on my path is that for what is spiritual for one person can be very vague for another, and so there's all these concepts about what is spirituality, right? Um, but let's just say, and I don't really like the term, to be honest. Let's just say moving towards a realization that we're not just human, but that we have in our humanity a connected aspect of us that's part of the divine, part of God, part of something greater, part of source, part of whatever you want to call that, but that imbues our physical lives, right? And moving towards a deeper integration with that. For me, that is a more defined form of spirituality. And what I see over time, and it's been more than 15 years of intense seeking for me, is that a lot of spiritual streams of or modalities or philosophies get you to trust, have faith, believe, hope, dream. And it's not that those things are not true, but to be direct, as this is raw and real, I like to be real about what's going on in the world as well. That's realistic, you know? What are realistic expectations aside from all the fancy promises that get brought into people that follow teachers or healers or groups or communities, and that often fall in this trap that we're on our way to something special that other people that are not doing this may not be getting to, and it becomes this big ego thing. And I really hate that. I really don't like it. And an example of that is where we're being taught that we're infinite. Okay, well, yes, from the divine level that I was just speaking about, right? That definition of spirituality, that we're all aspects of God incarnated in our bodies, physically experiencing ourselves as human. Yeah, we are infinite. But on the earthly level, the level of your daily reality, where you have to go to the grocery store and get your food for the week, you need money, and money is, as much as people would say it's infinite, it's not. It's still a scarce resource, because if it was infinite, everybody would be having it. It's not infinite. Many people don't. And that's one example of limitation, but also resources. As you see the world around you and you observe, it's not that we couldn't optimally organize all those resources for people, but at the same time, those resources aren't optimally divided, and there is scarcity of certain materials and resources. So there's scarcity as well in that sense. There's scarcity of the attention, that we can place our attention. We only have scarcity of time. There is only so much time that you can spend in your life, but also in your day and week and months and years. Scarcity, there's limitations. Those are restrictions. They're maybe not limitations, but they're restrictions. You have to find ways of optimally investing in your life through the constraints and the restrictions that are placed upon you on this earthly realm that we're living in, right? So this idea that we're infinite, already when you say we're infinite, you also have to recognize the other side of the coin, which is we're also finite. And so when spiritual teachers and healers start focusing on the infinite, not saying that's not good, that's not a good positive attitude to bring in more of that divinity in your body so you can experience more of yourself in life the way you want to. That's the goal. But when they don't recognize the reality of what's going on in the world today, are they being realistic? Are they being present with the moment? Are they helping you out at where you're actually at if you're following them? And I found on my journey that when people are really stuck, or they aren't getting ahead, as I wasn't, and they don't feel very creative, and they don't know what to do next, and they need help, but they're not really, then this infinity notion doesn't really help them any further. And so, and it's not like, okay, it's not like I'm not, holding open the door for good things to come in, and that I don't want to close that door down, because I have for a while. And this is one of the reasons why I'm showing up with this on Raw and Real, is I want to hold the door open for myself. So that's something that you can take away from this as well, as hold that door open, because otherwise we become embittered and resentful if we've listened to people that may have brought us unrealistic expectations, that we've fed into our own unrealistic expectations based on what are sometimes even false promises by people that often I see also profit from it, dare I say, and it leads to disappointments and disillusionments. you know and that really messed up my journey for a long time. I wallowed in that, recycling it, rehashing it, and I still do, because I find it, the word that comes to me is unforgivable. That I see, for example, and I'm going to name this directly, healers or teachers charge fortunes, $800, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 for sessions where they're not really helping those individuals, but they proclaim that they do, for example, with their healing work. And sure, they are helping at some level, and you can take an experience and learn from it always, but that's not the point here. The point is, when I look at that and I see people struggle, and also financially, as I am as well, and then healers and teachers take advantage of that by offering great promises that when you do their work, you'll get great results in life because you're infinite, right? And then year after year, they're following those programs and they're doing that work, as I was, doing that work intensively, really committing to it, really putting everything in, and then not seeing those results and spending so much money on it. That could be spent on tangible, physical, real things that I needed as well. It's not to say that I should have done that, because there's a reason, there's a perfection, there's an intelligence why things unfolded the way they did, but we don't use that as an excuse. The realistic part is, when I see those healers and teachers, then avoid the people that it isn't working for. And then when those people show up and I see them, because I've observed this dynamic for years, and I followed so many healers and teachers because I wanted everything. That's the type of person I am. I dove in, I wanted everything. I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to be the best, and I wanted to experience everything and take everything and get everything. And then the results didn't come every time. And then I just started over with someone else. That person is going to get me there. And then when I see other people do something similar and they don't get the results, and then those teachers and healers tell them, well, it's your responsibility because it's your life, so you didn't do it right. Then I go, and this big red flag that I felt actually and I ignored earlier on is like, well, that may be factually true, that it is our own responsibility. We need to take accountability for our lives. And that person invested into this, and that's their choice that they've done that. But there's an equal amount, or maybe even greater responsibility to me, on that person that is proclaiming to be a really good healer or teacher, that charges a fortune and makes big promises, or says that this and this work will deliver this and this and this, and then doesn't, because they can't fulfill those expectations. That to me is impure, when you don't own up to those things that you as a healer or teacher cannot do. Because a good teacher and healer, from a space of purity and truth, acknowledges their weaknesses and deficiencies and says, this is what I can't do. Rather than, because this is the shadow side, right? Confidence and self-worth are very important, and many people don't have it. I struggled with that a lot. But there's a shadow side to having too much confidence and self-worth. And it's not just arrogance, which is part of it, and ego, but it is also overestimating your abilities. And see, that is a very, you can feel it, right? That's not something that many people want to go to. Why is that? Because it touches on that piece again that I spoke about earlier here, we are infinite beings. So then if you're infinite, right, then you're not overestimating yourself as a healer, because we're infinite, right? That's what you're espousing to people. Infinite, infinite, infinite. You can attract everything, create anything, manifest anything. And so they can charge anything, be anything, But that's not what people in their daily human lives on Earth are realistically living in accordance with, when they have finite resources and means, and they're struggling to make ends meet, and they want to get ahead in their lives, which is a big part of humanity, I might add, and they're not getting there, and they're not seeing those results, which could lead to disappointment and disillusionment, which actually makes their journey worse rather than better. So that's the piece I wanted to share here on Raw and Real, because it is. And I'm not holding that back. So, on the other hand, I was also in a space. So we have, on the one hand, we have, we can't rely on promises, guarantees, and even predictions. People do predictions and all the how things are going to unfold in the world and where we'll be next and stuff. It's all ego. Nobody can predict that because life is not set in stone. Shared this before. Things change all the time. And most often those predictions are off anyway. It's just ego. But on the other hand, I really wanted answers and I needed guarantees in order to be safe, because I've been through, maybe some of you resonate with that. I've been through, so when you are going through a deep hole of fear, and it's a void of emptiness, and it's a transitional space, but you don't really know what it's transitioning into, and you don't really feel yourself anymore within that space because you so deeply lose yourself, and it takes so long. It's not like, I'm not talking about a space of 2 or 3 months. I'm talking about years and years of being in that space of not knowing and losing touch with your old self, thinking you're going crazy and not understanding what really is happening there. And you don't know where things end up, but you see these constant disappointments and disillusionments, and things get worse on all levels because you're being challenged and you don't know how to strengthen yourself within that space, and you keep presenting yourself out there with other people and teachers and healers to help you out, and it's not helping. Then of course you need answers and you want to listen to people and you want guarantees because you need that out of safety. That's what I had. That's not strange. And some of you will be in that position to some degree. But it starts by being realistic. And that was something that was really hard for me. Being realistic meant accepting the brokenness that I felt my life was representing to me. The non-achieving, the lack, the things that weren't materializing, the money that wasn't there, the health that wasn't there, the relationship that wasn't there, everything that wasn't there. So that's not something I wanted to go into even deeper by accepting it, right? That was part of the fear pattern too. But unfortunately, if you don't take responsibility by accepting that space, you can't really change it and grow, because you can't grow what you're in denial of or what you're not accepting. So that's another piece here. I had to find a way of trusting myself, depending on myself, even if I found myself not dependable. And I had to position my life and in a way, in a light where I saw myself having that inner strength to create that which I wanted without knowing what that even is or how it would look or if I would even know how to get there. But if I looked too much outside of myself for those teachers, those promises, those things, I became passive, and it became weakness to me. It became weakness to my system, and I weakened myself. And that is the hole that deepened rather than got me through. And that's a very scary experience, because it starts to feel like you're pushing against an invisible boulder to get out of the hole, and the boulder is growing and you're shrinking in your strength in comparison to that boulder. And then when people say trust the path and the whole thing, you're infinite, it's not very helpful, because you need to be able to anchor and integrate that sense of strength and power to know that you can overcome obstacles. But if the obstacle has become too big and it's weighing on you, it's like that boulder is weighing on you. You can't get it off you. You can't change that boulder, and it's growing. and it used to be a pebble maybe, but now it's a big giant boulder. It's very difficult to find your strength in that space. And unfortunately, the cycle becomes the more you look externally, the more you weaken yourself and your self-trust internally. So it becomes a very deeply spiritual, mental, emotional dynamic that is, in fact, even more painful because it's invisible. Others don't see that boulder, so they don't see you with that boulder, so they think everything's fine. And then people that are not quite so aware or sensitive project on you, which many of you will relate to, that everything's fine, why aren't you getting ahead? And that had different reasons as well. I can go into many reasons, but I'm trying to keep this a little bit succinct here for this podcast. But it is cliche, but unfortunately, real security does come from within. Even when everything is chaotic and difficult and impossible on the experience around you in the outer world. And I say unfortunately because I wanted those guarantees before I would move. And that life doesn't give those guarantees that things will turn out okay, whatever that definition exactly means, but the feeling of things being safe enough to turn out okay, to be what I wanted, which was actually comfort and rest and be taken care of, was a big part of that. And it's kind of nuanced again, right? It's nuanced because it's not to say that life doesn't take care of us, but it's when we depend on life externally taking care of us so that we don't internally strengthen ourselves with trust in ourselves. That's when it becomes a weak dynamic, which it became for me. That's the realistic answer. But the other side of that is I wasn't able to fully do it on my own. And we aren't able to do it on our own. So this is where that hook came in, to look outside for support, because I knew I wasn't able to do it on my own. And so there's this delicate balance between, yeah, you need to be by yourself, but you don't want to completely do it on your own. And then when you rely on external people like teachers and healers, they feed into the dynamic that I didn't want in my case. And it made me and it weakened me because I projected things outside of myself because I wasn't able to believe in myself to do things that I wanted. And even deeper than that, I wasn't able to feel what I really wanted. I was starting to get cut off from those feelings like I shared earlier. It's a scary space because you don't know what's up, what's down, what's left, what's right, where are you going, when are things going to get better? And then comes the drive for needing certainty again. It becomes very difficult, very complex. And then add in health struggles, illnesses, and many other factors. And all of those things invisible on the outside. Very painful. And it wears you down. So you have to be very careful if some of you are struggling with that. There is hope. Ironically, I'm going to share that. There is hope because, again, it's nuanced. And what isn't hope or belief in one setting that I've just described, in a nuanced other setting, context dependent, it may be very good. Just like dependencies are not always good, but seeking external support in the right way is. And just like the focus on God and divinity, which is the spiritual path, right? Let's call that the spiritual path, can be a divine distraction from yourself, even though you're on the path of looking for your connection with God, which is a good path to be on, right? Nobody's going to argue that. But it can be a distraction from yourself because the real power does lie within you moment to moment, in this moment. And the more you can channel the energy, all the power in you in this moment, and find ways of activating that work for you, grounding, getting connected to your body, feeling that force in anger. We're going to talk about that in another podcast because this is a big topic. And it may not be meditation. It may not fully be that, because meditation for me became a weakening force if I wasn't feeling my strength in other areas of my life where I was not taking action and moving forward or believing in myself or finding ways of motivating my feeling level response to life, right? So these things can become a distraction, as well as that, like I was saying, in another context, they can be good again. Because when you are feeling strong and feeling clear and moving forward, then connecting to your divinity becomes helpful and supportive to that. It all depends on which point of reference. This is another key for you to understand. Which point of reference are you coming from when you're doing what you're doing, or when you're believing what you're believing, or when you're following what you're following? That's the key. And being in a space of a long-term not knowing transition does allow you also the space to learn to begin to trust yourself, as it did for me, to find balance, to discover your own inner strength. But only, and this is the caveat, if you can use it that way, you know? And this is where I found many supportive modalities, let's say, were unable to actually support me truly. And others as well that I see painfully, like, and this goes deep into abuse dynamics, where they follow healers and teachers based on what they see in them, based on their own patterns that they're not willing to step out of by saying, I'm done with that because you're not really helping me. And I see that especially also with women that follow male role models that they think, and it's all in a one way innocent, and it's all very adorable, and it has a certain good quality to follow examples, to want examples. That's how much we crave examples of strong leadership in our society today. But at the other side of that, again, on raw and real here, I'm going to say it becomes an abuse dynamic that follows a pattern for them where they're actually weakening themselves and not getting those results, as I was doing as well. And then they keep defending that what that healer stands for, and they're not getting ahead in their life, and they're abusing themselves by the same pattern. And that healer has a responsibility of saying no to those clients, but they don't, because it earns them too much money very often. And again, to me, that is not something that I stand for. That is not pure. That is not truth. That is not connecting to divinity. That's deceiving, manipulating life and people. It can't be the right path. For me, I'd rather not do anything than do that, because that's my cutoff point. That's where my conscience comes in and says, I'm not going to profit from it in that way. That's just not right. There's still a lot of unforgiveness and bitterness and anger and resentment in me about that. And that's not going to be dissolved very soon. That is going to take a lot of time. And I acknowledge that. And I need to work through that. Finding myself again, which is what I've been doing. But if I can help those of you that are in a space where I get to help you prevent going down the rabbit hole with some of the mistakes that I made. And again, it's nuanced. It's not all a mistake. It depends also for me on my perspective of what happened. It doesn't have to be a mistake. And maybe I'll integrate a lot of the lessons and healings from that as time goes on. But it certainly wasn't the best for me. Let's put it that way. Right? And this is where the rubber meets the road. Right? This is where practicing, trusting, cultivating strength, clarity, dedication, and force within ourselves takes time. And it does take healing, and it does take the right type of healer to support you in the process of where you're at. And it does take a lot of standing up for yourself, because self-love and being kind to yourself is not a weakness. And it is something that sometimes requires force to say no to things that may seem like they're serving you, but actually distract you, that nobody else is telling you. It's another key I'm giving you here. Kind of speaks for itself, but I feel like it's important to share that. And there's a fine balance that needs to be found there, right? And another key that I wanted to share that I forgot to bring up here is making a narrative, like storytelling, can be empowering. So to structure your experience, right? To structure your experience is the key. How can you structure? I know it's a male or a masculine version of kind of structuring your life is that type of dynamic that for women may work a little bit less well in their feminine aspect. But at the same time, it gives you that safety that I, for example, needed, that I shared earlier here. And if you're in need of that safety, you need more structure, because structure gives you that safety. And the structure needs to come from you. And again, it can become abusive if you look for that in others. Now, the nuance here is certain others that you feel safe with can help you like create some of that structure if you can't fully do it on your own at this moment yet. But to structure your experiences and derive meaning from those experiences to heal is a part of the goal, I think, here, right? You probably agree with me. If you have a lot of wounding and you're on the way to heal and make a better life for yourself, you need to find an order and a structure to your experiences for your mind and your psyche. Your energy body needs to be able to flow and take back all that energy that you've lost to those experiences, and some of the joy and hope and dreams and happiness that you may have lost, which I certainly had a lot of. And turning all of your experiences into a positive or a narrative that serves you is empowering too. And it can serve the whole and others, which may be part of your path, as it was for me, you know? So that's a very important key. And finally, I want to share before we go here. So there's a balance between not distracting yourself from living a higher truth. That's your real self truth that comes from your divine or your God aspect, right? And being real in the world with what is and where you're at. There's a balance between those two that needs to be respected. And for me, that meant also taking part in it, because I thought I was respecting that balance while pulling back out of life, and created more isolation. And it didn't make me independent. It made me weaker and more dependent, because I wasn't able to master my own life in a space of more isolation. And that was hell. And it still is, because I'm still not out of that space. But it forges strength if you can use it with that narrative piece I was just saying, as a conscious a force to make me stronger and to build that momentum within, and to discipline myself, and to build routines and practices that serve me: exercise, health, good food, taking care of myself, meditation, sleep, taking these steps, showing up on these podcasts. That routine can become empowering, right? And one of the keys for me here also was humbleness, right? Humbleness, becoming more humble, because it opened me through my heart, where I had a lot of closure and still am, to be honest. Again, these healers and all that tremendous inner work that I've done, it didn't change that really. It made me a lot more conscious and a lot more awake and a lot more aware, but it didn't change those outcomes. Emotionally, I still have to go through what I avoided by being in that space. unfortunately for me. So another key there is to acknowledge yourself. This is what I had to do. And that may take the form of showing up. That's a form of self-acknowledgement. I could acknowledge myself all I wanted, but if I didn't take the action step of showing up, I wasn't really having the rubber meet the road here to truly show up and prove to myself and my higher self that I was acknowledging myself, right? And that's another one of those things where we're being taught that we just need to let go and trust and love and all that. But at the end of the day, it matters whether you actually put your money where your mouth is, where you actually take the steps and not talk just the steps, right? And that's still a very difficult, delicate process for me to go through every day. And I see that in others as well. But to acknowledge yourself is to put yourself in that divine light, to be seen by that. And then you also need that from other people, but after you've given it to yourself properly, and not in replacement of giving it to yourself properly. Then it becomes obviously a more weak dependency version of that. But enough about that for this podcast. That can be talked about next time. So I invite you to reflect, after having listened to this, on where you may be seeking those guarantees outside of yourself, where you may have become dependent on others outside of yourself. And it's not to make yourself wrong or to judge that. It's to become clear about putting that into that structure that I spoke about, to structure your experience and put what's real and what's here right now for you, and accepting the present moment and taking responsibility and accountability for that, so that you can strengthen from it in this moment. And then realize that from here, you want to grow. And what can you do now from this moment that's maybe different? And it may be the same, but it may come from a different place, right? Because what if that guarantee, I'm saying this to myself as well, but what if that guarantee that you really needed was your commitment to show up for you? That seals the gap to many of the, if you really committed to that and really felt that, and really felt the clarity and the strength of that commitment to you, it kind of seals that giving yourself away to others dynamic that so many sensitive people are struggling with. So that's another empowering piece that I would like to end with, and sit with that and let this work and percolate through your system, because there's a lot of information and wisdom coming through here. And I'm glad I was able to share it, and I even went over time, but I wanted to finish off with everything that I had in me to share for today. So I hope this is empowering to you and clear and helpful. And I'm grateful for you listening to this. And I will see you again on another podcast or somewhere else. Hopefully, have a good day, and see you next time. Bye-bye.